Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Today's question comes to us from Brian Hartman, KC0HOJ. He says he's been at the technician level for over 20 years, but largely inactive. Starting to get back into it and hopes to test for his general soon. That said, I will be looking for an HF rig. What are your thoughts about getting a used rig that is a generation or two older, like a Kenwood TS530, TS820, or a Yaesu FT840? I keep seeing mention of how they are rock-solid performers, and their users swear by them. And I don't want to be dazzled by the bells and whistles. Or is the technological advancement instilled in the newer radios worth the increased cost? There's a lot of things going on here, and I'd like to address several of them. First of all, the fact that people get their technician license and then go inactive for long periods of time. And there's a misperception among new technicians that getting an FM handheld and talking over repeaters is basically all they can do, especially if they have trouble hitting a repeater with a little handheld. Very often people do that. They need to put an antenna outside. Now, if they make that step to, adding an antenna outside and getting it properly grounded, they're well on their way to doing other decent things. There are many other things that you can do with your technician license. Probably best to go watch these being done by other hams, but everything from moon bounce, meteor bounce, satellite, all of these different kinds of things that you can do with the technician license. Television, the regional networks, that's AREDN. AREDN. You can also join in on emergency response capabilities, join ARES or RACES, or your local auxiliary communications. The Department of Homeland Security has been very positive on counties. All this is done at the county level. Counties including amateur radio operators in their emergency action plans. They can help, for example, if there are people going into a shelter. Often the first responders are needed at the scene, and so hams, by prior arrangement, can be in these responders, in these shelters, and handle the health and welfare traffic for these. You can do all that with a tech license. Okay? It's very easy to get involved. Now, I will admit, in my opinion, I think the most fun in amateur radio is on HF, because you've got much longer contacts that you can make. And it's almost like a party line. You get in there on the party line, you don't know who you're going to talk to next. It could be somebody in Africa, or it could be somebody in the next city. All different kinds of things can happen. So I encourage you, if you have a technician license and are not sure what to do with it, first find a club. Okay, you may have to do a little club shopping to get one you really like. Second, become a member of the ARRL, because just the monthly magazine alone helps you see what's available that you can do with your license and enables you to expand. Okay, now let's look at his question here, and that has to do with used rigs. Now, I've never purchased a used radio except my very, very, very first radio, which was a Heathkit AT1 that I was assured works, although I could find no evidence of that. And I did not have any troubleshooting skills at the time, and finally I just got a Heathkit HW16, which I built from a kit and got to work and really started talking to other people using Morse code. It was a great experience having that. And ever since, I've always thought to myself, I want to buy the new radios. Because if you buy a used radio, you find that some seem to pick up features. In fact, let's look up here. This radio right here is a Ten-Tec Jupiter, okay? I bought this new around the year 2000, and it had been out for 2 or 3 years before. It had some of the initial capability of software-defined radio, but it's a classic superhet. It just had little fun stuff behind it. Wonderful on the bandwidth. Now, one day the cat came on the table and was standing next to this, and I saw it a quarter second too late. The cat was about to throw up, and she popped a hairball right in here, right in that spot right there. And the liquid from that went down inside and caused problems with these keys right here. Now, I sent the rig back to Ten-Tec to clean it because I didn't know how to get it apart. I do now, but I didn't then. And when it came back, these keys worked, but not always as well as they should, okay? So this is a radio that if I were to sell it, I would say, now look, these keys right here, you may have a little trouble with. And having issues with pets is quite common, okay? And there's nothing about that Ten-Tec you can see that shows that it has problems with those particular buttons. So this is an example of where you could get a used rig that looks permanent, but you wonder why those buttons don't quite work right. In other words, if somebody were to purchase that without knowing about that problem, they would be buying not only the radio, but they'd be buying someone else's problems. And that's why I always buy new. The radio that I recommend is right now is the ICOM 7300, IC 7300. Great radio. Yaesu's come out with the FT10, which is also a very nice radio. There's several radios in that price class that you can take a look at, but we're talking $1,000 for the radio. So that can be a little expensive. Now, these other radios are much less expensive. However, the reason I warn newcomers away from used equipment is exactly what I showed you with that radio. But if all you've got is a few $100s, yes, that's what you're going to have to do. I would suggest buying it from somebody you know, with the understanding that if it doesn't work out, say, within 3 months, you can return it, no questions asked, okay? And make sure you get that agreement in there, because in that 3 months, you're going to want to get it on the air, try all the features, every single one. Some cases, it won't seem to work because you're using it wrong. That's where the previous owner can help you figure out how to use it right. All these kinds of things that you want to do. You are correct. These are good, solid radios. They'll do all the stuff that a more modern radio, well, though, what they do as well as any modern radio. Now, where the modern radios are a little bit different is when they get into the digital signal processing, you have what are called brick wall filters. Some of these older radios don't have those. A brick wall filter is if a signal is 1 kilohertz inside the passband, you hear it. If it's 1 kilohertz outside the passband, you don't. These are fabulous tuning aids. The radio on the end there is a Yaesu FTDX 3000. Okay? It's absolutely wonderful radio. And in fact, I have to say, of all the radios I've ever had, it has the best receiver. And it has incredible features for pulling a signal out of the noise. Now, it is not a beginner's radio. You could grow into it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I recommend something like an FTDX 10 or an ICOM 7300, which will still take you years to grow into. I have been a ham for a long time now, and it's getting close to 50 years, so I've seen a lot of radios in my time. Okay, it says, I keep seeing mention of how they're rock-solid performers. Yes. Their users swear by them. Yes. And he doesn't want to be dazzled by the bells and whistles. I think the ICOM 7300 that we have over here, this is the reference station right here, does awful lots of stuff for a fairly entry-level radio. I would call this an entry to intermediate quality radio. And sorry, it's not much attached to it right now. But this kind of radio allows you to use the modern filters. It shows you the entire band on a scope here so that you don't have to tune across the signal to know that it's there, okay? Because you will see the signal and you can tune right to it. Whereas in the older radios, you actually have to tune up and down the band. You can also see what your audio signal looks like, both in the frequency and the time domain. It's got all kinds of filters. It has modern noise reduction, which is really, really wonderful. These older radios don't have this. This is probably the most powerful button on here for being able to receive things. It's got all the memories and stuff, but I call this a point and shoot radio. It's got lots of things, but you can just use the point and shoot features. Put it in point and shoot mode. You've got your tuning, you got your volume and tune button, and you're ready to go. You're ready to go, okay? These older radios don't have a lot of these features. Now, if you start out with one of the older radios, you won't miss it. But as soon as you get used to it, you won't want to go back. So that is just something to keep in mind there. Now, again, I recommend that people not get a radio that's aimed at a general or an extra when you're still a tech. Get your license update, then get the radio. Okay? Is the technological advancement instilled in the newer radios worth the increased cost? Actually, the ICOM 7300 almost destroyed the used radio market. And the reason for that is because it does so much for a reasonable price that the prices of other used radios has dropped dramatically. Okay, so yes, there is new technology. Is it worth it? That's kind of up to you. Now, I've got another radio up here. This I did buy used, but more for fun than anything else. This is ancient. The Yaesu FT101B. This radio came out in the early 1970s. So it's a 50-year-old radio. It has two tubes in it, a driver and the two finals. And so they have to be tuned. That's why you've got all these knobs over here. You can turn on the power and just listen, but then you have to turn on the heaters and the tubes when you want to transmit. Now, this radio being entirely analog sounds like an analog radio. I think it sounds wonderful. It has zero bells and whistles, except a noise blanker. That was for ignition noise, which was a problem back then. An RF attenuator if the signal's too strong, and an internal crystal calibrator. Okay, this was all analog tuning at the time. And note that it tunes only to the nearest kilohertz. Each one of these marks is a kilohertz apart. Whereas on this radio, you can tune down 1,000 times further, down to the individual hertz. Same on this, same on the ICOM. Okay, whereas this, you know you're kind of sort of here, and that's why you have the calibrator, so you can calibrate this thing by moving this dial like this to get what you want and then getting it tuned in. So it's a pretty amazing little radio. This, in early 1970s, about 1970, was the cat's meow for radios. Okay, the technological differences between this and the ICOM 7300 are incredible. Do they both work? Yes, they do. In fact, this radio is in working condition. So, Brian, I hope that helps to answer your question, and I encourage you to continue on your studies to become a general. If you join the ARRL, you can use your ARRL login credentials to go to learn.arrl.org and go to the On the Air section. It's a whole bunch of training videos, and you'll find my set of videos that will train you to general. They're all current. We just updated them for the new test. And you'll need to get the ARRL textbook to go with it. They work hand in glove. So, there you have it. Be sure to enter the drawing for the giveaway. The instructions are below. And if you would like, there are ways to get in touch with me, ask questions, and so on. It all follows right after what's coming up right now, and that is to say, until we next meet, 73.